a gun in the face.
Then all of a sudden, they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
Started 2 years of horror for an American in Venezuela.
They said, you need to give us your phone and get ready because you're coming with us.
I'm Becky Bruce, and I spent a year researching and piecing together Josh and Tammy Holt's story about their ordeal in a notorious prison.
That's when everything started to turn bad. We had another pound on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And there was the police once again.
You can binge all of the episodes of Hope in Darkness on kslpodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. Brought to you by our friends at useonlyasdirected.org. 3-part solution: speak out, opt out, and throw out. We're listening to Damion from Renaissance Ranch. He's getting ready to talk about when he went full blown. Now, we heard your story in the first part of the episode, and I mean, pretty hazy, pretty dark. You know, a lot's going on. But now you're divorced. You're living in your parents' basement, collecting unemployment, not really looking for a job, rekindled your love affair with alcohol and pills, and you say you call it the dark because you really don't remember much.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time just being in a haze. And I actually did end up finding a job in California, being an account manager for a disaster recovery firm, and I was not a good employee. I didn't do my job. I just wanted the paycheck, you know. And
why'd you move to California?
I didn't move there. That's where they were based out of. I stayed in California or North Carolina and worked remotely.
Okay.
But I would go to these different job sites, and you know, I would put on this show of being this outgoing, like energetic, fun guy, and I landed a few jobs for my firm, and they were like, "Yeah, this guy's awesome." And I got some bonuses and some money coming in, and I started to think like, yeah, I'm pretty awesome, you know, all the time hating myself because I could stand to be with me.
But your company thinks you're pretty awesome because you're landing them new clients, and the whole time you're taking pills and drinking.
Yeah.
So you don't see the pills and drinking as a detriment.
No, I thought it was what was helping me do it. Yeah, I was so insane that was the way that I was accomplishing it, so I had to have more of it if I wanted more.
I can't get rid of this.
No.
I've got a winning recipe right now. I say that to you because I had the same thing going on in my life. That I say this right now. You know, back when I was in my active addiction, I fought harder for alcohol to be in my life than anything else, which sounds insane, and it is insane.
It is,
but I did. I fought harder to keep alcohol in my life.
Yeah, I loved it so much. Crazy love affair.
So you're getting new business, you're doing this, you're still living in your parents' basement.
Mm. And then I start to decide that, well, I should start dating.
Ooh.
You know, because the fact of the matter is I can abuse relationships and will use that to numb my feelings as much as I'll use any drug. Very codependent.
Yeah.
But what I would do is I would see a pretty girl like when I was traveling, or, you know, a contact from someone that wanted to set me up. Hey, this guy's pretty awesome. They didn't know all the deep, dark stuff that was going on. They would introduce me, and I'd tell these girls up front, like, all right, well, I'm Mormon. You know, I don't sleep before, I don't have sex before marriage and that kind of stuff. And so I put on this really like valiant, like, Knight of Honor kind of a thing, for lack of a better way to describe it, knowing full well that I wanted to have sex with them. I wanted to numb. I wanted to get mine. And it wasn't about them at all. Super selfish and self-seeking. And so what I do is I get a girlfriend, date her a few times. We'd end up sleeping together, and then I would break up with her because I felt so much guilt and shame, you know. And I did that 4 times with 4 different girls after I was divorced. And so this being a temple recommend holder and priesthood bearer and all that kind of stuff, and so come around 2013, I literally was waking up every day wanting to die. I just didn't want to be around anymore. I was too scared to kill myself, but I'd have like suicidal ideation of maybe I could fall down the stairs and break my neck, or if I could just, I would be driving in my car and this voice in my head would just be like, swerve off the road. And it was constantly just end your life. And the pain was so great that no amount of alcohol or pills was able to take that away. It would numb it a little bit and take the edge off. I don't know how I'm still alive. In fact, I had taken so many pills with alcohol at that time that I can remember being in bed and I would stop breathing. And all of a sudden I would just big gasp of air and I would wake up. And somehow I didn't die. I should have, with the amount of medication and alcohol I was ingesting into my body. And for some reason I decided that I wanted to try to get some help. And so I went to my branch president at the time and told him what was going on, left out a lot of the details with the abuse, but told him about the girlfriends and what I had been doing. And so he said he needed to talk to the stake president and that we would kind of go from there. So I have a meeting with the stake president. He interviews me. I tell him the story of all that was going on, and they end up holding a council, to review my case. And I walk in, I think it was a Sunday, into this council to go over what I had been doing, because I was an elder in the church and the priesthood bearer and a temple recommend holder, and the stake president was a former bishop. The second counselor of the stake presidency was a former bishop, or the first counselor was a former bishop, and the second counselor was my uncle and my father's younger brother. And I knew everybody in that room. And at that point, that was probably one of the lowest points in my life to that point. I felt so ashamed, that I had been doing these things and I had not lived up to what I had promised to do. I ended up being excommunicated from the church. I know that those men are good men and just doing the best that they could and what they felt. And when I left, I just felt resentment. I was mad.
Pissed.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, y'all shouldn't have done that to me. You should have had more compassion. This is the first time I've had any disciplinary counsel and stuff, and you've excommunicated me. Oh, the shame, And so after being excommunicated, I was right back to, why did I even do that in the first place? Look at where it got me. At least before, I was still a priesthood bearer and still a member of the church.
Not worthy, but yeah.
Not worthy. But I was so in denial, which is another defect I have. And so I just carried that blame and stuff, man. And it was probably a few months later, I ended up stealing medication from my dad. So now I don't have any money. I'm unemployed at this time because I lost my job. Still living in the basement. Yep. In my 30s. And I still want to die every day, but I still can't stop using. So I stole medication from my parents, my dad, pain medication. And then I noticed that my grandma had a bunch of pain pills, and so I offered to go over and sit with her because she was older and needed some assistance. She was still living at home, and I did that specifically so I could steal from her. Not because I wanted to be with her. I couldn't feel love or compassion or empathy. I just wanted pills.
And the addict brain takes over at that point, is what they'll tell you. That's what, if Dr. Matt was here, he would say, well, that's the addict. I mean, you're just trying to get what you need.
Yeah,
it doesn't make it right, but I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, just a dark point. And I ended up stealing some pills and got busted, and then I had it at family intervention. And they told me that they wanted me to get some help.
Was it like an old school intervention? Did you sit down? Did people read letters?
It was, we sat down on the couch in my parents' place. A former branch president had come, my branch president at the time. My uncle was on the phone, my parents.
Brothers?
And no brothers. No, just those guys. And all I felt at that point is I was mad. I was mad at them for calling me out. I was mad that they knew, because I thought I was hiding it pretty well.
You might not be a good hider.
Not at all. So I had this intervention, and they were like, you need some help, and these are your options. You can move out of the basement, go do what you're going to do, or you can go to this place called Renaissance Ranch, and this is 14. I might be a little off on the years. It's 2013 to 14. I think it was 14 when this intervention happened, and they said you can go to Renaissance Ranch, and so I took option A to go get some help, mainly because I didn't want to be out on my own. I knew I couldn't survive on my own. Mm-hmm. And so my parents and I flew to Utah. Came out here to Utah. And when we got here, we were staying at my grandpa's place. My grandmother had passed away, my mom's mom, who I was very close to. Stayed with my grandpa, and I actually sat with him that night and had a decent conversation. He was pretty much there. He was a little senile at that time, and that night he passed away. The day we got there, the night we got there. And so the next day it was like I was supposed to go to treatment, but then my grandpa died, and so there was going to be a funeral. And I ended up meeting with an LDS family services counselor and told him that I needed treatment, but I didn't want to go inpatient. I thought outpatient would be the way to go, because I didn't think my addiction was that bad. And I sugar-coated some stuff, and I tried to manipulate him. I don't know if he knew that or not, but
probably pretty.
He ended up agreeing with me and doing some outpatient stuff. And so we came up with this plan, and I remember my mother just being really disappointed. She was convinced that I needed to go inpatient, and I was just like, I'm not going to do it. I wasn't ready, and I also didn't want to. I wanted a better life, and I did want to be done with drugs and alcohol, but I wasn't willing to do what that took. And so I started an outpatient program in Orem, and it was, a night a week talking to a therapist. They invited me to group, and I was like, no, I don't need group. I just need to talk to a therapist. And lo and behold, in 2 weeks, man, I was cured. Just cured. Like, the disease was gone. I had no more desire to do anything. Like, I felt good. No 12 steps, no nothing. Just cool, awesome, life's better. And I worked it out to live with one of my brothers that was out here in Utah. I had two brothers at that time that were living here in Utah. And I started with one, and then after a couple of weeks went to the other's house and was trying to find a job. And I did land a job, and things started to look up. I started working at this place, and eventually moved out with some roommates. And then I decided, man, somebody introduced me to Tinder.
Oh, swiping right.
And I kept calling it Kinder. I didn't even know what it was, but I got on there, and it was like, wow, this is like a game. This is fun.
Online shopping.
It was so addictive. So I traded my addictions. I wasn't using or drinking at that time, but I was looking for girls, a girlfriend, relationships, because I still hated myself. I still didn't know what was wrong with me, but I thought I was cured. And then I started just dating different girls online and working, and ended up meeting another girl, and we got really close. She had a place. She was from Utah. She was super cute and kind and seemed really open. And I was honest with her about my excommunication, how I wanted to come back to the church. I was still excommunicated. At that point, it had been almost a year. And then after a year, they told me I could reapply and have an interview and go through the steps and things and get rebaptized. And I thought that was my desire, but I also realized now that I wanted to do that so that I could please my family, so that I wasn't like this outcast, this black sheep, which I already was, but, he's coming back to the fold. And so it was a lot about pretenses and putting on a show.
You weren't doing it for the right reasons.
Nah. not at all. But I told this girl too, 'cause she was an active member, and that was my desire. And long story short, we ended up getting married after a few months and of dating, and I moved in with her, and we had a wedding that the bishop performed because I couldn't go to the temple or anything, and so things were pretty good for a while. You know, I ended up finding a different job actually, that's not true. I ended up being let go from that job because I didn't feel like they were paying me enough, and ended up finding another job at a transportation company and started that. So I only had a couple months unemployed, and that really scared my wife at the time, and it kind of scared me too, remembering how it had been before. And I really didn't want to go back there. Like, that was my honest intention and motivations. I don't want to go back to how it was. I want to be better. I just wasn't capable, you know. I kept trying to do it on my own. I kept trying to figure it out and think my way through it, and that got me into nothing but trouble, man.
Yeah, you can't outthink the disease.
No.
I tried.
I tried too. I tried moving.
Yeah,
you can't several times.
You can't outrun it. You can't outthink it. You can't outmove it.
Nope. It doesn't work like that. Anytime it's based on self and me doing it, I have failed every single time.
So you start this new job. How's everything going with the new wife?
We have our ups and downs, little spats here and there. But as I look back, what I noticed is I wasn't being emotionally honest. I wasn't capable. We weren't equally yoked. You know, I'm still an alcoholic, a dry alcoholic. I'm still an addict. And I'm not using, but what I am using are different character defects to numb my pain. Blame, denial, laziness. And those would come out, and I would use those as weapons. I would turn things around on her. I would manipulate words, you know, to try to get what I wanted. It was still always about me. So selfish. And I couldn't see that at the time. I didn't know that's what it was. I was convinced that it was her fault, or that it was the job's fault, or that it was my kid's fault, or whatever, whoever it was. It was never my fault, right? And so I'm working at this place, and then my children are coming out to visit because by this time her mom had remarried. They lived in Virginia for a while, then back in North Carolina, then they moved to Texas. And when they moved to Texas, it was right before I came to Utah to get help. And I figured, well, 1,000 miles from North Carolina, 1,000 miles from Utah, it doesn't really matter, right? I can go get treatment. And I had planned to go back to North Carolina. Well, I stayed in Utah since 2014 after I got married and stuff. And I felt better about myself having a wife by my side. I had a stepson who I love both of them, even now, dearly. You know, we're no longer together. But they were amazing people. I had amazing in-laws, but I still wasn't capable of even loving my in-laws. It was still always about me. But my children had come out, and I noticed that my children were on ADD meds, you know, and I was really curious. So I tried one of my kids' medications they had brought with them. And lo and behold, I felt like I did before. It was a different kind of feeling, but it was exhilarating, you know. So I got introduced to those ADD meds, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It'll come back to me.
Adderall, Ritalin?
Adderall, thank you. It was Adderall, yeah. And that was my first exposure. So then I was like, you know what? I need an Adderall prescription, because when I took it, I was like a machine. I could get so much done. All these great ideas were coming to me. I was just running, and I was more efficient at work, and I was like, there it is. Like, this is probably what I've been meant to take.
This is the one.
This is the one. Not alcohol, because that one messes my life up.
Not the pills.
Pills, I can't take those.
But Adderall.
Adderall's a great idea. Yeah. So then I start on the Adderall kick and go into the doctor, right back to the same old behavior patterns of lying and manipulating and telling him what I need. He starts me off on a low dose, and after a while it's not enough, and then I go to a higher dose and then a higher dose until finally I get the maximum dose and the maximum pills I can get in a month.
We're listening to Damien's story here on Project Recovery. He's talking about his introduction into Adderall, and that's after alcohol and opioids. So we're going to find out more about that in just a second. Stick around. More Project Recovery on the way.
A stranger with a gun came upon 2 teens taking pictures under a rising full moon. But violence is only the beginning of this story.
Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and I've spent my career talking about how lives are undone by violence. The Letter is a podcast about how lives are remade. Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
So Adderall is your new love.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting the maximum prescription from the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Is that lasting you a month?
Initially, for the first few months, it does. It does. After about 3, maybe 4 months, I decide, well, I need to take another half when I take this whole one. And then it was, I need another half because I was prescribed 30 milligrams 3 times a day, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly but surely, within a few months' time, I'm taking that whole prescription in 2 weeks. So then the choice comes, well, do I try to find more? And that one had a DEA tracking number, and, I didn't want to get busted. And so I literally just would be 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I didn't buy any on the street this time. And I was really proud of myself for not doing that. Really proud. Well, I know I can't buy them on the street anymore. I don't want to go back to that. I'm going to abuse the hell out of it and almost kill myself and then not be able to function for 2 weeks. But I'll have a great 2 weeks and then a crappy 2 weeks. And somehow I didn't get fired from my job. I kept working and doing it. And then I actually found a better job because I was getting so good at it with the Adderall, I thought, that paid more. And it was working for Colliers International, and it was a guy I had worked with at the transportation company. I just decided to call him one day, and he told me he had found this other place and to come over and interview for an accounting job. And so I did and got the job, and I actually did pretty well at that with the Adderall. Still not capable of connecting with people. A lot of isolation, a lot of misery. Still hating myself, but so numb that most of the time that I didn't have to worry about it, And so I do this for about 2 months at Colliers International and abusing this medication. And then October rolls around, and my marriage at the time, we were struggling. I couldn't be there. I wasn't there again. And she knows something's wrong. She doesn't know what it is, but she knows something's wrong. And then I started to develop a psychosis from abusing the Adderall for a year and taking so much and then abusing my body on and off to where I think that there are government agents watching me in my phone. And then I was convinced that I was being tracked. And then I got really paranoid. And so this paranoia set in. And I started to try to do all these different things to try to throw them off my trail. And so, because I'm so important, the government wants to watch me,
Yeah. I know, I'm with you.
It was awful, man. It was a living hell.
So eventually, I guess this all comes to a crashing end?
It does. So to get to that point, towards the end of October, I basically accused my wonderful coworkers of tracking me, of planning things on my phone, of colluding with the government to try to put me in jail and all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot there that we don't have time to go into, but it was bad. And I spent the weekend trying to get my phone reset. I wiped my phone. I deleted my iCloud, lost all my photos and different things from earlier from my kids and all these different files and stuff. And it was just about protecting me and making sure I was okay because I didn't want to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes to a head where my wife asked me to move out. She says, I can't do this. I want you to go stay at your brother's for a while. I go to my brother's, and then all this stuff, these feelings come up, and I don't have any more Adderall, and I start to come down, and it just felt like pure hell. And so it all came to a head on Halloween. I'd been at my brother's for a couple of days, and they were out trick-or-treating, and every time the door bell rang with probably kids wanting candy, I was in a corner in the guest room shivering, thinking it was the government agents coming to black bag me and take me to Guantanamo Bay. I was convinced. I was convinced that was what was going to happen, and that the family was in on it. I couldn't trust them. They weren't willingly doing it, but they wanted to save their own skin. My kids were in on it. Like, there was no one I could trust. I was literally alone. And I can remember just saying out loud, I need help. And so I prayed for the first time in a long time. It wasn't really a prayer. It was just like, God, if you're there, I need help. Otherwise, I'm going to end it.
But you said it out loud.
I did. Just said, I need help a few times. And that help came in the form of loving brothers that took me to LDS Family Services again to talk to someone. Within 2 minutes, the guy was like, you need inpatient treatment. And he recommended Renaissance Ranch. So my second go around, I actually chose to go.
But the second time Renaissance Ranch has popped up in your addiction.
Yep.
But this time you chose to go.
I did. I went because I knew I needed help. I was scared. I was afraid of a divorce again, which ended up eventually happening anyway.
Yeah.
And I really went back to try to save that too, if I'm being honest. But I didn't have anywhere else to go either. I went in and was honest with my colleagues at work and said, hey, I need to go to treatment. And I thought they would fire me. But they were like, just go and take as much time as you need. Like, your job will be here. And they fully supported me, and I was amazed by that. Scared, but amazed. Then I get to Renaissance Ranch, and we start working the steps.
Because Renaissance Ranch is a 12-step.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Bluffdale. My brother rode with me so he could take my car back, and I walk in, and I have a couple suitcases not knowing what to expect.
Yeah.
But just knowing that I was sick and going through my second divorce or separation and pending divorce and just all these different things. And I had never just felt so alone. Like that was my rock bottom.
Walking in.
Yeah. And so we sit and they greeted me and people are hugging me and I'm like, what is this crap? Don't hug me. I don't know you. And they're honest and they're like, hey, what's your DOC? And I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Drug of choice.
And he's like, what's your drug of choice? And I was like, well, most recently Adderall, but it's been alcohol and pills before. And I just never had anyone be that open with me and ask me what my drug of choice was. That blew my mind. So I was kind of like curious but scared and also just felt weird. But I remember when we sat in these classes with our TCs, which is the therapeutic community, and then some of the things with counselors and different stuff, and we started to work these steps, which I remembered from ARP, but they were different because they were based on AA. And I had to write out this step one, and then I had to present it to the group, and that's terrified me. And as I'm sitting there doing this step one, and Chris Groves, who I love to death, is the counselor there, and she's reading this, and she's asking me questions, and then she looks around the room and says, who else has felt like they just wanted to kill themselves? Who else has felt utterly alone? Who else has felt what Damion has felt? And everyone raised their hand. And it blew me away. I thought I was the only one.
First time you didn't feel alone.
It was the first time I felt like I belonged somewhere, amongst a lot of other sick men, alcoholics and addicts. Like, those are my people. And so that finally started to click. So I fast forward a little bit. I don't know how we're doing on time.
We're okay. Go.
But fast forward a little bit. I worked through the different steps. I worked step 2, step 3. Then I get to step 4, which is the moral inventory, which is terrifying.
Oh.
Took me a week, scared to death to talk about some of the stuff on my inventory, do a step 5 with someone. which I treated as a confession because that's what I knew, going to the bishop and confess your sins, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways it is, getting secrets out because we're only as sick as our secrets.
Right.
But more than anything, it was just him, this other person, like saying, no, I don't think that's why you did that. Because for me, when you do different types of inventory, you do fears, people you've harmed, you do resentments, and you do sexual inventory, which sexual inventory usually carries the most shame for everybody. Mm-hmm. So that was the one I was terrified most, so that's the one we started with. And going through that, like what I had thought was like sexual instinct and what I thought was, just some type of me just wanting to get my groove on or whatever, it turned out to be mostly self-esteem. If I had a pretty girl on my arm and people could see that, then I was okay. I didn't hate myself so bad. And that opened up my eyes. Like going through that and the resentments, the people that I resented and blamed, it was like, well, what was your side of the street? Where did you set the ball rolling, Damion? And that opened my eyes. And then all of my fears, like, why do I have them? Fear for me is based on a couple things. I'm going to not get what I want, or I'm going to lose something that I have. And that was eye-opening, too, to see why I had the fears that I have. And so my life starts to become unfolded, and I start to see things as they really are, not as I thought they were or the rose-colored glasses I'd been seeing the world through. And then I learned to start challenging even old beliefs, because I grew up with a very shameful God. Like, if I didn't do what he said, he's going to cast me off, he's going to hate me, he's going to punish me. And so I spent a lot of time in that. Even though I was working later steps, I was still stuck at step 2. I still didn't have a God that I could really trust or believe in.
Yeah.
And that continued for months, even after I left inpatient and went to outpatient treatment. But when I finally was able to come up with a conception of God, someone that loved me, truly loved me, accepted me in every single way, where I was at the moment, right then, that didn't shame me, that didn't want to cast me off, but just wanted to help. That changed everything for me.
Game changer.
Game changer. So for the first time, I got a God, a higher power that I could love, that loved me unconditionally. And that, like, my recovery took off to a whole nother level once I finally got that step. But then it was like, well, now you got to turn your will over to him. That's step 3. So then I was stuck at step 3 because that was really scary. Because you turn your will over to somebody and it's like, I'll do whatever you say, like whatever you have planned, I'll accept. No, I wasn't ready for that. That was scary, man. Like that was the hardest step for me, was turning that will. So I got a sponsor. There'd been these suggestions in these different meetings. Get a sponsor, go to meetings, work the steps, be honest with people, pick up trash where you see it. Somebody would say that a lot. And so I started, and make your bed. I think we talked about that before we started.
Yeah, they told me in recovery, make your bed first thing in the morning, because if that's all you do, at least you did one thing right.
And that's like so true, because almost 3 years now, I've made it every single day. That's my commitment for the day when I start, that I will stay sober today.
And it's top of mind, we're mindful, and it sets you on the right path.
It did. And I've found in recovery, it's the little things. It's the very small and simple means that the cool stuff happens.
So what do you think makes Renaissance Ranch so special?
One of the things that comes to my mind right off the bat is the brotherhood.
The community.
The level of community.
We've talked about that. If Dr. Matt was here, I would say, hey, what's the opposite of addiction? Dr. Matt would say connection. A lot of people think it's abstinence, but it's not. It's connection, and it's finding that community, that brotherhood, somebody to work with. Yeah. And it sounds like Renaissance Ranch is great for that. Yeah, absolutely. I have never been in another place where I have felt so connected and so loved and accepted for who I am, where I am. I don't have to put on pretenses. I don't have to pretend that things are great. I don't have to be a certain way. Like, they accept and love me for who I am, where I am. So how many days did you do in Renaissance Ranch? So inpatient, I was there for almost 60. I think it was 57. I went in on a Monday, November 6th, and I got out
of inpatient and switched to transition New Year's Eve. And then I began my outpatient treatment, which I completed at the end of August of 2018. During that time, I had knee surgery when I was in outpatient, which was really scary and hard. My company was bought out, and I thought, because it was actually CBC Advisors, Coldwell Banker at that time, and it was bought out by Colliers. So I thought I was going to lose my job. I mean, life kept happening. I went through that divorce, which was hard because I was still in love with her, or what I thought was love. There were things like that, like my daughter was struggling in Texas, my middle daughter, who now lives with me. My son was struggling. There were just a lot of different things that I didn't have control over, and what I kept going back to was what my sponsor had told me, which was, thy will be done. When you're feeling off, dude, he said, just say thy will be done. And so I would say that step 3 prayer that I learned over and over and just keep saying thy will be done. I don't know what's best, you do.
In the recovery world, they would say those things would be triggers for you. And the fact that you didn't use when those were presented to you speaks volumes of the program that you went through.
Absolutely.
So much in the fact that after you were out, you got a call to come back and work there.
Yeah, I did. So at the end of towards the end of 2018, my middle daughter decides that she wants to come live with me, and I was scared to death. And her mom was willing to let her come, and so we worked it out, and she came to live with me, and I was like, I don't know where we're going to live. I was living in a basement apartment with 2 other guys that were in their 20s and super cool guys, but I was like, she can't stay here. So then I started to look for a place, and I was thinking about renting and just tried some different things, and it just didn't feel right. And so my brother one day was like, why don't you just buy a place? And I was like, dude, I can't buy a place. I'm too afraid to even look at my credit. I know it's horrible. Because this whole time I'm not paying attention to it. I don't pay people back.
Oh, yeah.
I put it in the little black box and put it away, and then it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Just straight up denial.
I got a black box.
I had put everything in there, and I was just too afraid to look. And so as I'm working steps 8 and 9, it talks about facing our creditors. So I started to do that. And then I had a knee surgery to pay for. And then I had all these bills from years past that I had just put away. And somehow I'm able to start chipping away at that. Like my money isn't going to drugs or alcohol or Adderall. And I'm not just frivolously spending stuff. And things started to change. And so my brother had made that suggestion. I heard it from one other person. And usually God talks to me through other people. Mm-hmm. It's never this burning feeling for me. Maybe I'm too hard-headed. I'm sure that's the case. But it usually comes in the form of other people telling me, that I hear it a few times. So I heard that a couple times. I'm like, okay. So my brother gives me a contact of someone in the lending industry, and I contact him. And I right off the bat, I just said, hey, I'm in recovery. I'm too scared to look at my credit score. It's probably really crappy, but I figured, why not? And so he looks at it, and he's like, yeah, it's a 642. You qualified for an FHA loan. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And so then that process started of me buying a home, and then another lender became involved from this place that I saw that I wanted to buy. And so these lenders then started to bid against each other. And I was just open and honest with them. I didn't try to play a game or try to get something out of it. Like, I was actually honest with both of them, and it felt good.
Huh, that's a novel concept.
Amazing. And it worked out for the best. And then one of the coolest things about buying that place was that my brother, knowing what I had gone through, and my family supported me the whole time. Like, they came to visit me when I was in-house. They would invite me over to dinner when I was in outpatient. Like, they really looked after me. My parents, too. Like, everybody showed so much love. So much love. And I just didn't feel worthy of it. But it was so cool to have that support and love, and to love me through those hard times, in spite of everything that I had done to them. And so we're going through this buying a place, and my brother had talked to his business. So he's actually a real estate agent, and this real estate firm, they all chip in this money And he invites me to come share my story in front of all these real estate agents that I don't know, and I was scared to death. And so I go, and I start sharing my story, and at the end of it, they have all contributed this money so I could buy some appliances because I didn't have anything.
Oh, man.
And then
cool.
it just was given to me, and I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was just blown away by the goodness of the people around me and a God that loved me. And so I ended up, my daughter comes right after Thanksgiving, and we move into our new place the second week of December, and we've been there ever since, in Eagle Mountain.
Sweet, man. I love it when good things happen.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And then later in 2019, I was still working for Colliers, and Tyson Dixon, one of the owners of Renaissance Ranch, who I love dearly, contacts me and says, hey, man, do you like your job? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable here. They give me a few raises, and things were going well, and I love the people I work with. Like I said, they supported me through my recovery, and I've made some lifelong friends there. And he just tells me what's going on with the ranch and some of the things they were doing, and puts a bug in my ear. And so I start to think about it and pray about it, and eventually decided to make the move to Renaissance. So at the end of 2019, I come over and finish up my other job at Colliers and left them, who I still love. I'm actually going to go visit them right after this to see how they're doing. I still am friends with those guys. Amazing I can have relationships today.
Yeah.
And started working with Renaissance Ranch, and we had some closures and things of the women's programs, but the men's programs really just started to take off. We increased the number of beds. And I love working for the place that saved my life. I love working with the people that helped me when I was at my lowest, when I didn't think I can do it. Because sobriety, especially initially, was more painful than being in my addiction. Like, it sucked, and it was hard.
Well, I'm honored that you stopped by and were able to share your story with our listeners. It's amazing, and you're a testament to the good things that can happen when we decide to put sobriety first. So thank you very much, and thank you to everybody for listening today. Sorry Dr. Matt couldn't be here. This would have been probably a lot more insightful if he was. But I thought it was a great episode nonetheless, so thank you very much. You're listening to Project Recovery, a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.
Two friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
Two teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it. I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.